Welcome to Minutes That Matter. In this video, we will learn about how to configure group policies. In this two-part video, this is part 2. In previous video, we have learned how to apply basic group policies on OU, domain, and site. In this video, we will see some advanced options related to group policies. So, in Server Manager, let's go to Group Policy Management. Now let's expand domain names, that is india.com in here. Notice we have something called default domain policy. Now let's see how default domain policy affects by default on our computer. Now when we go to Active Directory users and computers, let's say we want to reset the password of a user. Let's say we give a new password, say 1234, and we'll confirm the password 1234. Now we see an error. The password does not meet the password policy requirement. So there is a password policy in place which is not allowing the user to have a password which is just 4 characters long. Now let's say we can try with a password which is 7 characters long, ASD@123. Notice the password changed successfully. Here the password complexity requirement is satisfied. So how do I change this? Let's go to Group Policy Management window, Default Domain Policy, right click and edit. Now, default domain policy deals with computer policy or computer configuration. So we'll expand computer configuration, under that expand policies, under that Windows settings, and in Windows settings under security settings, expand account policies. Click on password policy. Now you can see all the password policies. The enforced password history, or maximum password age, or minimum password age, or minimum password length. Now by default it is 7 characters. Now we can increase the number of characters to as many as 14 by default, and as minimum as 0. That is, we can avoid completely the password, no password, now which is absolutely not recommended. So let's go back to the 8 character long password option and let's test it. And by the way, there is one more option which is also related to account policies, that is account lockout policy. Now if a user enters 3 subsequent times wrong password, then the account will lock out. So if the account logs out, the account lockout duration should be at least for say 30 minutes by default. So if we want, we can change this setting to any other time, but for now let's say we'll keep it to 30 minutes and 3 invalid attempts. Now how do we check this policy, right? So let's go ahead and give GP update to update the group policy. Now we can use GP update or GP update /force. Now what we expect after the group policy has updated, we would like to test it by resetting the password of a user. So let's go back to say Active Directory users and computers, and let's right click on a user and say reset password. This time I'm giving password 123@ASD. Once again 123@ASD. This time it is only 7 characters, hence the error. Now let's try one more time. Reset password. I'm giving 123@ASDF. Now this time it is 8 characters. Let's check. So the group policy which we modified is working. Now let's check one more interesting option in group policies. Now we do have one more default policy called default domain controllers policy. Now we'll check this default domain controller policy. Now let's say we already signed in as administrator, so we'll sign out and we'll try to sign in as a Active Directory user, say user 3. Let's give the password and log in directly locally into the domain controller. Notice the sign-in method you are trying to use isn't allowed. Now, no user or a default user is not allowed to log into the domain controller. Now, only a particular set of users who are privileged are only allowed to log into the domain controller. Now, how do we check that option and how do we allow any specific user to log in? Let's see. Now we are going back to the group policy management window, expand domains, and let's expand domain controllers, or we can directly click on group policy objects. Now right click on default domain controllers policy and select edit. Now we can go for a full screen, and once again under computer configuration, expand policies, expand Windows settings, expand security settings. Now this time we'll click on local policies. Under that, user rights assignment. Look at the 6th option in here, allow logon locally. Now these are the default operators who are allowed to log on locally. Account operators, administrators, and so on. Now we want to allow user 03. So let's type the username and check names and add. Now besides other administrator accounts, user 3 is also allowed to log in. Now that we have changed a setting in group policy, we are supposed to update the group policy. So let's update the group policy by using GP update. Now let's sign out and sign in once again as user 3. Now that we have given user 3 allow logon locally permissions, user 3 should not get any error. So group policy is modified. Now that user has logged into a domain controller, it doesn't mean user has administrative privileges. Let's check. Now I'm trying to click on server manager as a user 3. Notice user account control message has appeared. Now this user account control is limiting the user to access the server manager. So though the user has logged in as into the local computer or the domain controller, the users still don't have administrative privileges. Now let's sign out and sign in back as administrator. Now if I just type administrator or India/administrator, either ways it's going to log in as a domain administrator. Okay, so now we have learned how to apply or how to modify group policy related to domain and group policy related to domain controllers. Now let's check some other options. Say for example, I want to block the policy which is applied at a domain level. Now I can use something like block inheritance on the OU, which will block the policies applied at site or domain. Now, at the site level, we have remove recycle bin, and at the domain level, we have welcome script. Now, what we did, we applied block inheritance at the OU level. So, what should actually happen? Only the policy which is applied at the OU level should work, and the policies applied at the site level and domain level should not work. So let's go to the client side and see if block inheritance is applied or not. So we are supposed to see recycle bin and we are not supposed to see welcome message. Okay, so block inheritance is working. We are not seeing this PC because this PC group policy is applied at the OU level. So let's sign out, go back to the server and open group policy management. Now, if there is a block inheritance applied at an OU level, can we bypass this block inheritance? Answer is yes. Now how do we do that? We can go for choosing an option called enforce. So if a policy is enforced at a higher level, that is say at a domain level or site level, block inheritance at the lower level will not be applicable. So let's test this option. Now I have given enforce for the script at the domain level. So we should get the welcome script. There it is. We are able to see the welcome script. So enforce is taking the higher priority compared to block inheritance. Now let's sign out from the client. Go back to the server. Now I can also apply block inheritance at a domain level. Now we cannot apply block inheritance at a site level because site level is the highest level already to apply group policy. Notice we have no block inheritance option at site level. Now that we have learned how to apply block inheritance and how to use enforce, we'll go for deleting these group policies, and let me show you one more concept. Okay, so all the group policies which we have applied separately are deleted. Now let's say I want to apply a group policy not once but multiple times, a same setting multiple times on different OUs. Can I do that? Now let me create a new group policy. Notice there is an option called source starter GPO. Now the starter GPO will allow us to link a starter GPO to any new policy we make. So let's create a new starter GPO. Let's call it as say SGPO01 or SGPO1. Okay. Now there is something to understand and make sure you get it well. There is something to notice here, that is starter GPO can only work with administrative templates. Okay, so let's expand user configuration. Try an example. Say we want to block or prohibit access to control panel. Now let's select and enable that policy. Apply. OK. Now the starter GPO is modified with prohibiting access to the control panel, right? Now, if at all I'm creating a new group policy, now I can always include the starter GPO with my new group policy. So the new group policy will get affected, plus whatever setting we have enabled in starter GPO also will be linked. Hence, I need not modify the control panel group policy again. So I can use the same starter GPO for multiple group policies. Let's check. Notice prohibit access to control panel is enabled in our new group policy. Now you know we can use starter GPO like a template with multiple group policies we create. So we can link this new policy on an OU, and all the users in that OU will not be able to access control panel. Now, if at all we want to know what group policies are applied on a container, say a user or an OU or a domain, there is an interesting option called Resultant set of policies. Now we can right click on an OU or right click on a user or right click on a computer or even right click on a domain and check for this option called RSOP, stands for Resultant set of policies. So let's skip to the final in the wizard and click next and finish. Now what it is going to do, it's going to show us what are all the group policies which are applied on a particular object or a container. Now we can see we have applied prohibit access to the control panel group policy on the OU, and so we can see that as the RSOP result. I believe now you understand how to check any group policy which is applied on any container or object. So that's all for now in this video. I hope you have learned quite enough about group policies in part 1 and part 2 of group policy video. Let's reset everything back to normal. Thank you for watching.